Good evening, my name is Don Phillips. This is my Cull 233 final project. I interviewed Austin Ono, the executive sous chef at Westmoreland Country Club. Austin has worked at Westmoreland Country Club for 5 years. This is his sixth summer. I asked him how many employees he managed on a daily basis, and he stated that that number changes throughout the season because they are a country club. Their volume of business goes up dramatically during the summer months and then drops off in the spring and the fall and then picks up again during the holidays. He runs a staff of 9 cooks and 2 dishwashers that are full-time employees. That staff is available year-round. Then he also maintains or adds between 5 and 10 interns on a seasonal basis for the summer, a couple additional part-time cooks, and a couple additional part-time dishwashers. I asked, a little bit about his operation in the club, and he said there were 575 members at the club. They pay a one-time fee of $75,000 to belong, and they are also responsible for the food and beverage, any guests that they bring to the club, whether that be golf or tennis, and then they may also partake in tennis lessons, golf lessons, swimming lessons, and so forth. The club has a pastry kitchen, a prep kitchen, a banquet kitchen on the first floor, and the main line downstairs that services the main indoor dining room, as well as an 80-seat outdoor patio. Um, they maintain a full-time kitchen to service the pool and tennis in a separate building, as well as a small halfway house for golf. His annual budget ranges roughly $350,000 for labor, and food cost is roughly $550,000 annually. They manage anywhere between a 35 to 45% food cost on a consistent basis, and that is to deliver a really high quality product to the member. Um, I asked him what has remained constant over the last few years, and he stated that he's seen a major shift over the past few years in the way the members utilize the amenities of the club. In the past, it was really about big events, big bottles of wine, big fancy parties, and now that seems to have turned more towards family-oriented club with a change in their menu and a change in their production schedules. I asked him what challenges he'd faced in the past few years, and he stated there were a couple. We'll address the first one now, which is the economy. He said that the people are spending less, the members are spending less. Prior to 2007, they ran about 30% larger budget, 25% larger budget for almost everything at the club. They used to have a full-time staff of 15 that went up to 18 or 20 in the summer, plus they would add interns. And I asked him how they're managing that, if they had to reduce staff based on the economy. And he stated that they bring in more interns during the summer months, which placed more pressure on management to train staff and to monitor quality. Um, which really kind of led me into my next question, which was how had the economy impacted his workplace? Uh, Basically, the largest challenge he's faced was the reduction of staff. As sales dropped, revenue dropped. As revenue dropped, staff had to be reduced. So they went from a full-time staff of 18 to 20 down to an 11 to 13. They consolidated some positions into one group. They eliminated a few positions. But one of the more interesting things that they did, which not necessarily to the benefit of the employee, but to the benefit of the club and the organization as a whole, was they took their lead cooks, their best cooks in each station at each time, and they promoted one to lead. So 1 a.m. lead cook, 1 p.m. lead cook, one banquet lead cook. They took that person to an exempt position, made them managerial. Um, but what it really did for the club was it allowed them to utilize that person for greater than 40 hours without having to pay them overtime. Any employee of the club receives benefits after 6 months of employment, so that wasn't necessarily a key driving piece or benefit to the employee. The benefit to the employee was that when the club is closed in January, they still receive a paycheck. They don't have to go on overtime. He also stated that overtime was a huge concern now, whereas in the past it wasn't really as big of a concern. So they're really managing their schedules based on trying to maintain a 40-hour or less workplace environment for their full-time staff, with the exception of their lead cooks or their managers. Austin works probably 60 to 65 hours a week, anywhere between 2 weeks before Memorial Day all the way through the end of Labor Day. And then that gets a little break, and then it ramps back up again into the fall holiday season. I asked him if there was a formal training program, and he stated that no, there really wasn't a formal training program for full-time employees. They try to hire experienced cooks, um, they, but they do spend a great deal of time working with the interns to get them up to speed um, as quickly as possible. Um, I asked how the seasonality impacted his staff and production, and he stated that his core group of people was capable of producing food at a very high level. The volume of food obviously goes up during the summer, and then they have to work with the interns to offset some of those larger production increases. Um, those interns spend a great deal of time working prep. Some of the easier lunch stations, dinner stations, maybe cold salad gourmet station, or desserts, and they also spend a great deal of time working on banquets. They have lots of large events, at least once or twice a week, and almost 2 or 3 every weekend. I asked him how he scheduled staff. He said the line cooks work a station, stays relatively constant. Broiler cook is broiler cook. Um, Saute cook is saute cook, but he did state that they rotated all of their employees through each station so that they would cross train in the event of time off, an unexcused or an excused absence, or maybe just a vacation. Um, I asked him about production. He stated that he had an average of 150 covers on a weekend night on the downstairs line, and during the weekends, especially during the summer, that number could swell to 275 or greater during peak periods. That's done with 4 cooks. So obviously, mise en place became a pretty huge part of their component, the training piece that leads to that mise en place. And what they did was they handled that with the creation of an employee standard operating procedure. They had standardized recipes based on quantity needed for the station. They had prep lists for each station. So the cook could take an inventory of his station, say I need 17 of these, I need 5 of these, I need 8 of those, and that would be his prep list for the next day. So at the end of each service, the cook would know exactly what he needed to produce for the next day. Sometimes the morning cooks could help with that prep. Sometimes the interns could help with that prep. But that information was communicated from the cook to the sous chef or the executive chef, and then they would prepare the next day's mise en place based on that. Um, all of that information was contained in a station book, like a 3-ring binder, that was laminated. So the cook could pull it out, grab a menu, flip through, grab another menu, grab his next inventory form, fill that out, leave it on the station, or give it to the chef at the end of the night, and then they'd be prepared to start their mise en place in the next day. One of the things I also asked about was how do you look for new employees and how do you screen candidates? I was really concerned about HR and how they managed that whole process. Um, he stated that they did have an HR department. It wasn't huge. It was relatively new to the club, and the HR department created an orientation program, reviewed the training procedures program, and also did all background checks and employee screenings. Um, he said that really freed the cooks up, the chefs up, to manage their departments and took a lot of the pressure off of them. The only pressure that remained was how they found employees and how they screened employees for hiring. They said that they looked at every single option for hiring an employee, But they found that word of mouth was the most effective employee handling process. Um, what they would do then is they'd bring an employee in, they'd interview him. At least two of the managers on staff would interview the employee. From there, they would give the employee a mystery basket if they liked them. If they completed the mystery basket to a satisfactory level, they would have them complete the application process, and then they would have them undergo a background check and drug check. Um, at that point, if they cleared everything, they would be offered an employment position, and then they would go through the orientation program, which was held at the beginning and the end of the seasons, kind of to get the seasonal employees up to speed, and then make sure the full-time employees knew of any changes. And then if there were any one-off employee hires during the season, they might go through a smaller process. Um, I asked if they had any lawsuits or discriminatory problems, and he said that they've been very fortunate in that regard. He said, we stress quality, we don't tolerate any harassment. Every now and then we may have someone that does get close to crossing the line, but we try to nip that in the bud. I asked what they were looking for in an applicant, and he said they want a hardworking person that wants to succeed. They screen for drugs, they screen for alcohol, and they check references. They're looking for any problems with missed time, time off, absences, absenteeism, those types of things. If they find it in the interview process, they'll automatically disqualify a candidate for hiring. He did state that it was so expensive to get someone up to speed that they really try to get their new hires right. I asked about disciplinary problems. How do they manage those? He stated that they're formal and informal. Their informal process would really be that one of the managers or one of the leads identifies a problem in behavior. They try to nip it in the bud, just like a training opportunity, if you will. They sit the employee down quickly. It's off the record. Hey, I saw you do this. That's not acceptable. This is a better way to handle the situation. Please take note of it. Let me know if you have any questions. From there, if the problem really seems to accelerate, that might become a verbal warning. If it continues to happen, it becomes a written warning, at which point in time they may or may not begin the process of filing for termination. He stated that basically it has to be a verbal, a written, and then reinforced with either the general manager or the executive chef regarding, or not regarding, requesting termination. I asked if there were any challenges he had faced, and he said outside of the economy and the changes to staff, the club has gone through 3 general managers over the last 5 years, and that's presented a lot of challenges as far as expectations. And so they didn't really know what was expected of them in the kitchen relative to the members. There was a lot of pushing and pulling and kind of conflict there. But the last general manager was released. The new general manager's on board, and things seem to be going well. I asked him what really kind of defined well in that circumstance, and he said that communication was the key. I asked him what he thought he'd learned over the years as a manager. So, what are the things that you've done that help you manage your staff better? And he really stated that experience gave him the tools to be successful as a manager. And the one thing that he took away was that training and communication were 2 pieces that helped him manage most effectively. Um, he stated that a smart, informed, and trained staff is much easier for him to manage. And that's why they created their standard operating procedures. That's why they cross-train their employees on different stations. I asked him what he found most rewarding about his position, and he stated that when a cook succeeds, whether it's within the club and gets a promotion, or goes somewhere else and gets an opportunity to run a restaurant or run a kitchen or be an instructor at a culinary school, those were things that he felt the most pride in. He said he was very grateful to have an opportunity to be part of that. I asked him what the key was to being a successful manager. Again, he said communication is the only thing that he believes, other than dotting his I's and crossing his T's, that helps him to be a better manager. That's a general overview of what I learned from my interview with Austin Ono. I hope you found it interesting. Have a great evening.